a good majority of my resistance as to why I didn't want to go to Korea was a lot because of the stigma that I was kind of raised around in a predominantly white area in my school system, of like being mocked constantly for being Asian as a general term, because they never specified Koreans, it was just Asian. And like I never wanted to be that outcast. Like I wanted to fit in, I wanted to be American, I wanted to, or whatever that even actually means, being American.
If you've turned on the TV recently, you might have seen these 7 young men being interviewed on Good Morning America, or joking around with talk show hosts like Jimmy Fallon, or maybe even speaking to the United Nations Children Fund. They comprise Bangtansoneondan, or BTS, an internationally acclaimed K-pop group. K-pop groups such as Big Bang or 21 have performed to sold-out arenas in North America. Korean TV shows like Nengjangorul Butake, or Chef in My Fridge, or Korean films like Busanhaeng or Train to Busan are increasingly popular on platforms such as Netflix. Korean foodstuffs, such as ramyeon, are beginning to be sold in general supermarkets, and Korean beauty products can be found in many mainstream pharmacies. Summer Hollywood hit Crazy Rich Asians, the first U.S. feature film with an all-Asian cast in a quarter century, featured Korean-American actor Ken Jeong, as well as Chinese and Korean-American hip-hop artist Aquafina. With Asian culture, and also specifically Korean culture, having a moment in the United States, more attention is being paid to frequently underrepresented Asian American voices. But one group of Koreans in the United States is often overlooked: adoptees. Most adoptees usually come to the United States as young children, and are typically raised by parents who are neither Korean nor Asian, and thus tend to have different experiences than those of their Asian American peers. I recently spoke to 4 Korean adoptees about their experiences growing up in Connecticut. This is Megan. She's a 4th-year student at the University of Connecticut. She lives in a dorm with her 2 rabbits, and she is hoping to obtain her degree by the end of the school year. But it wasn't always easy for Megan growing up as a Korean adoptee.
The people I went to school with who like would point out how different I looked from them, but I kind of feel like I always considered myself white. Like my parents are white, and like I always thought that I was like white, and that sounds super strange, but like I never really noticed a difference between like our looks to the extent that I think other individuals noticed it.
But Megan wasn't the only person who experienced this. I also spoke to Seneca, a Korean adoptee from Woodbridge, Connecticut. Seneca was uncomfortable being recorded, but she agreed to an interview by email. Speaking about her childhood, she told me, "I used to get asked if I was abandoned, or if my real parents loved me. I got teased about the size of my eyes, and if I could count the fingers someone was holding up."
I liked the town I grew up in. I like to think the best in people, but there have definitely been times where like kids like have been mean, like genuinely mean, and it has come with the intent of like just because of the way I look, or like and that's happened throughout my life.
The experience growing up was the hardest, solely based on the fact that I knew I wasn't like everyone else. I didn't look like my entire family, and I knew I was different. Growing up, I got asked all the time if my real parents abandoned me and left me, or if they ever loved me.
It was in 6th grade. It was at the end of the year. Everybody was signing each other's yearbooks and whatnot. And this one kid, he signed my yearbook with his name, but he also wrote, "You Asian kid." He was Asian himself. He spelled it AZN because that was the cool way to spell it at the time. Don't know if it still is. But anyway, so that's when it started to kind of click that, yeah, I'm not white. I'm not like my parents.
That's Ben, talking about when he first realized that he was Asian. He told me that he had an overall positive experience growing up in a diverse community in East Hartford. He now lives in Manchester, and after a hard day of work, he enjoys coming home and playing video games. I asked him if he experienced discrimination when he attended college outside of East Hartford.
If there was any discrimination, I wouldn't have noticed it because I'm not very good at picking up a lot of those subtle cues. I do think, however, that my disability has provided somewhat of a buffer to whatever discrimination I might have faced, because it's like, well, yeah, this dude's Asian, but I don't know if I want to be a jerk to this guy because it's not going to make me look good. It's going to, if anything, it's going to make me look like a dick.
One time I was enrolled in an, I can't remember, it was like an Asian history class, and I like walked in and the professor like started speaking like Chinese to me, and I was like, I'm Korean, I don't know what you're saying. And then they proceeded to like start speaking Korean to me, and it was like, I was like, I was raised by white people, I don't know what you're saying.
I guess as I grew older, I never really questioned it. I always knew that I was different. Like, I knew that my parents were both white, and my sister and I looked very different, and I eventually had asked about it, just like to kind of get a little bit more of a broad knowledge. And they explained to me that they adopted me and my sister, and we weren't biologically brother and sister. She was from a different part of Korea. But I don't know, it never really fazed me like it would maybe some other people.
That was Ethan. He's a recent political science graduate from Sacred Heart University. He's currently living in Cheshire with his parents and his sister, who is also a Korean adoptee.
I took Italian classes as a kid. My papa, he spoke fluent Italian, and he wanted me to kind of be immersed into that because a lot of the family speaks Italian. And I took a few classes with him, and I was starting to pick up on it, and then I just kind of lost interest in it. To be honest, like, I don't know how much access I would have had to like Korean teachings or classes like that. Maybe if it was more available to me if I was in a more of a diverse town compared to Cheshire.
Given that only 3.8% of Connecticut's population identifies as Asian, you may be wondering how Korean adoptees came to live here, and why people in the US began adopting Korean children in the first place. The answer is a bit complicated, but in short, during the Korean War, South Korea was devastated. At the time, the country was considered poorer and far worse off than North Korea. The war itself led to an influx of orphans that the South Korean government was ill-equipped to handle. At the same time, the United States was accepting virtually no immigrants from Asia due to the Discriminatory Immigration Act of 1924. But U.S. citizens expressing interest in adopting children from Korea was one reason the 1953 Refugee Relief Act was passed by Congress, thereby streamlining the process of international adoption. As the economy began to improve in the 1970s, the administration of South Korean dictator Park Chung-hee continued sending adoptees overseas, largely so the South Korean government wouldn't have to take care of them. Although adoptions from South Korea still continue today, they are far fewer in number. In fact, in recent years, the South Korean government has aimed to end the practice altogether, following several high-profile cases of abuse at the hands of adoptive parents. I asked those I interviewed, given their own experiences, if they would recommend adoption to prospective adoptive parents.
I would absolutely recommend adopting from Korea because adoption in general is such a great thing, and I think a lot of times people overlook it. And I know even like I've heard comments of like, well, you don't have the miracle of life, or like you're not giving birth. Adoption is a beautiful aspect in like a different way.
I'd say absolutely go for it. I am 1000% behind you. My only small nitpick would be that especially if it's a white couple, do your homework. Do your homework about the culture. Do your homework about the context of that culture in which you're going to be raising that child.
I would advise someone to adopt, because it's giving another child a chance at a life that you are going to give them.
I've only had good experiences with people that were adopted from Korea. I mean, granted, it's a small sample size. I probably have about 5 or 6. But I don't see why it would almost be like a bad thing.
To be clear, I only spoke to 4 individuals. They can't possibly speak for all adoptees. And sadly, some adoptees' experiences are not as positive. In fact, rampant discrimination, abusive parents, and an overall feeling of not fitting in have led some adoptees to attempt returning to South Korea. However, many who try to return often report difficulties assimilating to Korean culture. But as for those I interviewed, only Seneca has actually visited South Korea, and doing so didn't seem to be a priority for the others. They all appeared content living in the United States. It's where they were brought up and where they feel most comfortable. For them, it's home, regardless of where they were born. Do you wish perhaps that you had learned Korean?
Educationally, I want to say yes, but with the way my parents raised me, I'm going to say no, because I think it would have added an element of you are different than us into our relationship. And I can't say whether or not that would have been good or bad because I didn't go through it, but I think it definitely would have affected the bond that I do have with my parents now. And I like the bond that I have with my parents. I'm very close to them.